for our next slide presentation, well, this one is a split screen that we would use when we are doing typical PowerPoint presentation, right? So no real animations. As you can see, I've used a fly-in illustration on this one, but just for the purposes of keeping some motion in the slide. I'm also using a moving background for exactly that same purpose. So I'm explaining the file system features that might affect a migration, for example. And so I begin with a discussion of quotas and how quotas established at the source may not be respected at the target, and that needs to be confirmed. Then I say, well, okay, as you can see, I have my clever animation. Next would be deduplication and some of the ramifications of migrating deduplicated information. Next is compression, file level retention, and tiering. Again, I'm using this example from troubleshooting just to demonstrate the sort of, me and Scotty, the sort of slide that we would use for this split screen shot. And this would be a very, very traditional style of PowerPoint presentation, except that instead of having my talking head or a shot of me pacing about in a classroom with some disinterested students on one side and the slide itself in another, well, we have it here all in one package, which I, as the instructor, am working to engage the student in, and which the graphics of the presentation are designed to engage the student. So for the most straightforward PowerPoint presentations, think of this particular style of split screen shot. And away we go. Welcome back, now that I've been beamed down from the EMC mothership, or at least part of me. There we are. This demonstration has to do with the presentation of whiteboard-style illustrations. And there's a challenge to whiteboarding in direct video presentation, which is basically the same challenge that we find in ILT modalities, which is that you have to turn your back on your students. And then also, depending on how talented an artist you are and how practiced you are at the illustration, it may be difficult to read. It may or may not get your point across the way that you really want it to. In this modality, well, we have the opportunity to really prepare everything we want to use in advance. And so here I have an example of just some what really seem like random shapes, and in fact they are random shapes, but let's say I was using them to explain some sort of topological or configuration issues. Well, so I have my initial shapes, and maybe this is the outline of the customer implementation, and then I add from this a line moving to another object, and a line from there, and then another object behind it, all along explaining what I would be explaining as I drew these objects on a whiteboard, except doing it directly to the audience with what I'm explaining being presented, in this case, in a split screen right next to me. I can add objects and populate the environment. I can use different entrance types, so again, all the standard animation, which can, again, you can do whatever you like in terms of aesthetics, but what we're trying to do here is take advantage of a whiteboard-style presentation without the inconvenience and inappropriate change of perspective for the student that a traditional whiteboard session would have. And so by creating our objects in advance and adding them, we have the advantages of traditional whiteboarding, but we also introduce a direct explanation that accompanies that whiteboarding without any interruption, without any change in the interaction between, the direct interaction, I should say, between the instructor and the student. And now, Jason, if you'd beam me out, I think we've concluded this demo.